70 Christians, men, women, and even children were brutally beheaded in Kasanga, a village in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, you might be hearing about this for the very first time, and that right there is a huge part of the problem. If the victims had been another religious or minority group, you can bet that the headlines would be plastered everywhere. But because these were Christians, Congolese Christians, the world just seems to shrug. In this video, I'm going to show you how this tragedy unfolded alongside a dangerous theology that labels Christians as polytheists. And I'm going to ask the uncomfortable question, would the world care if they weren't Christians? Before we dive in, let me set the stage really quickly. So the Kasanga massacre occurred in the eastern part of the DRC. According to various reports, including the Wikipedia entry on the Kasanga massacre, an ISIS-affiliated group swept through a church, leaving behind a horror show of beheadings. 70 Christians, including women and children, were slaughtered. And this is not a scene from a movie. This is a reality on the ground in Central Africa. And yet, I have to ask the question, why is this not front page news? This probably is the first time you're hearing about this. In a recorded interview, Dexter Van Zyl, an expert on anti-Christian violence, put it pretty bluntly.
If you were to replace 70 Congolese Christian with any other minority group, 70 Palestinians were beheaded, 70 people at a pride parade were beheaded, this would be the biggest news story of the decade. And yet this just happened and no one's reporting on it. And literally crickets.
Right. And it's like that with Boko Haram when they murder people in Nigeria. There's basically crickets. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have essentially kind of an anti-Christian bias on the part of people who run the media. And the thing is that I think there's another factor is that essentially Christianity has been lumped in with essentially this whole notion of settler colonialism, and that whatever violence is directed their way is largely a consequence of the violence perpetrated by Christians in years past.
His words expose a stunning blind spot in global media coverage where outrage is selective and Christian victims are often overlooked. The Democratic Republic of Congo is a absolutely massive country that's been in constant turmoil for decades. Civil wars, regional conflicts, and foreign interventions have made DRC one of the most volatile places on earth. Groups like the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF, which have pledged loyalty to ISIS, use terror tactics to gain control of strategic territories, especially mineral-rich areas. Quoting Dexter Van Zyl again, he points out,
the violence was perpetrated by an organization that was affiliated with ISIS. And the thing is that there are some people who have argued that they are essentially working on behalf of Rwanda, because Rwanda is a neighboring country that covets and is actually taking control of an awful lot of the mineral resources in Kivu.
Minerals in the DRC are crucial for the global tech industry, used in the devices that we actually hold in our hands every day. This messy interaction, though, of geopolitics, mineral exploitation, and jihadist ideology creates a sort of perfect storm where ordinary civilians, often Christians, become the first casualties. But why is the media so silent about this? Unfortunately, this is not new. We've seen it happen over and over, from Boko Haram's atrocities in Nigeria to extremist attacks on Christians in Sudan and beyond. Here's a shocking piece of insight from Dexter Van Zyl.
The thing is that unfortunately, this is the cynical side of me. I've been somebody that has documented hostility towards Israel for the past 20 years. But if the IDF were responsible for these beheadings, it would have made the front page of the Washington Post and the New York Times and every newspaper throughout the world. And there would be, Israeli Jews condemning it as well. But the problem is that because it's essentially black on black violence, nobody cares.
What's happening here is that there's a sort of narrative mismatch. The mainstream media often covers conflicts that align with certain political or cultural frames, but an attack on Black African Christians by Islamist militants, that doesn't easily translate into neat Western headlines. And that's the tragedy here. If the victims don't fit a preferred story, the coverage is minimal at best. Now let's address something really important here, the religious driver behind attacks like this. And yes, this is a complicated geopolitical situation, but let's not pretend that there isn't a religious dimension to it. In the Islamic tradition, Surah 9:5, often referred to as the verse of the sword, says this: Then, when the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists wherever you find them. That phrase, kill the polytheist, has been used by extremist groups to justify violence against Christians, and it's very easy to see why. Dawa apologists like Muhammad Ajab and others will often label Christians as polytheists because of our Trinitarian belief. But if Christians are polytheists, and the Quran says to kill the polytheists wherever you find them, is it really any surprise when Christians are brutally killed by extremist Muslims? When such groups call Christians mushrikun, those who commit shirk or polytheism, they believe that they have a religious license to kill. And this is exactly the mindset behind so many attacks on Christians in Africa and the Middle East. They see it not just as like a territorial or political battle, but as a divine mandate. And that's why ignoring the Islamic angle misses a critical piece of the puzzle. But here is the gut-wrenching question we have to confront. Would the world care more if these victims were not Christians? Like if we replaced Congolese Christians with a group more favored by Western media narratives, global coverage would absolutely explode on this story. But why not for these believers? Well, because we're talking about Black African Christians in a remote conflict-ridden area. They don't have like a powerful lobby. They don't command the same international attention. So they're relegated to a media footnote, even in mass casualty attacks like this. And this is not just tragic, it's morally bankrupt. The question we have to ask is this: does every human life hold the same value or not? Are Christians in the Congo any less valuable than any other persecuted minority across the globe? When you see these images or hear these stories, families torn apart, churches desecrated, children beheaded, remember, these are real people, real souls with the same inherent worth as anyone else. Ignoring them simply because their plight doesn't fit a clean Western narrative is a blatant act of hypocrisy. Okay, we have a situation where extremist ideology explicitly targets Christians, labeling them as polytheists, citing religious verse to justify murdering them. 70 were beheaded in a church. 70. This is exactly what Dexter Van Zyl was warning us about, and it's exactly why we have to stand up and shout, yes, this matters. We can't let these voices go unheard. We can't pretend like it's just some over-there problem. This is a global problem. When religious extremists can butcher whole congregations and we barely hear a peep from the mainstream media, that just emboldens more violence. We have to spread awareness about this. We have to put pressure on our media, our governments, our churches, our communities to care about this story. Because if we don't, these attacks will continue in silence and continue to escalate, and they're going to be overshadowed by selective outrage. Thank you guys for watching, but let's make some noise about this. All right, share this video, spread the word, remind the world that every victim of persecution deserves to be seen, heard, and remembered, no matter who they are, the color of their skin, or what religion they happen to profess.